Okay, here we're doing a test. We're trying to see what capacity we actually get out of this 60-litre buffer tank when linked to a variable speed drive pump, which we can actually adjust the pressure on. So what we've got in place here is we've got a tank, we've got the variable speed drive pump feeding from it. At the moment, we've got it set to 3.5 bar, and at the default threshold that allows it to drop to 70% of the pressure before it turns on again. Then on the pressurized buffer tank, we've got the air side hooked up to a pressure gauge and a little compressor that we can adjust the pressure in the tank. Here we've got a flow meter and a pressure gauge, and then here a valve, which is then feeding a hose pipe going around here to these 5 18.9 litre bottles to give us an idea of what the actual amount of water it is we're getting out before the system turns on. So the reason why we're doing this is we had a client contact us where typically the theoretical logic is that you can get 50% to 60% of the capacity of a tank as water storage with these pressurized buffer tanks. And he contacted us and said, but he's only getting about 10 litres out of the system before the pump switches on again, which is exactly what we're seeing in our test here. Let's just demonstrate that. So if we open this hose pipe a bit, the tank is dropping slowly where we are at 3.3 bar, 3.2 bar, 3 bar pressure. We'd expect it to turn on at about 2.6. There we're at about 2.8. A little under halfway of the bottle. Then there we go. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got a little bit under half a bottle. So we actually got a little bit less than what the client was seeing with the 10 litres, which we can increase it a bit by adjusting the pump, but we want to test and see what we're actually getting in the tank initially. So we just wait for the pump to get everything back filled up and back up to 3.5 bar. Okay, now that the pump thinks the tank is full again, what we're going to do is we're going to switch off the pump and just to actually measure what the total volume is that we've got inside of the tank. Now we've set the tank to the manufacturer spec, which is 2 bar pressure inside, and that's typically the one thing we can play around with to see if we can get more capacity, is to adjust the pressure in the tank to the ideal situation. So now we're just going to see how much water we get just straight out of the tank until it's completely empty. There we're back down to about the 2.6 bar where the pump switched on last time, and we're at a similar level of water as compared to what we had in the other bottle. But if we allow it to drop further, we do get more water. Now we're very close to the 2 bar pressure, and the tank should be, when it reaches 2 bar pressure, should be empty, as that's the air pressure in the bladder, and there the water flow has stopped. So this is an 18.9 litre bottle, so we probably got about 16 litres or so out of that, where conventional wisdom would say we should be getting a lot more than that out of a 60 litre buffer tank. So now let's start experimenting and see what we can get. Okay, so now we get to testing. Our air pressure in the tank is 2 bar. Now there's 2 methods that you can adjust it in my mind. The one is to lower it while it's empty, as then you can see what the actual pressure in the bladder is. The other is to let it get to its desired pressure and then start letting air out, air out, air out. I've previously done changing the base pressure quite a few times, and this is how we normally do it. But with the pressure gauge on here, we're just going to try it the other way. So what I'm going to allow it to do is just build up to its 3.5 bar pressure, and then I'm going to let air out of the tank a bit and see if the pump kicks back in to let more water in. So let's just start up the pump. Okay, there the pump is going, about 2.5 bar. There we're at about 3 bar, and we can hear the pump is starting to slow as it's a variable speed drive one. 3.4 bar, 3.5. Okay, now I'm going to start letting air out. And see if we can get more water in. Get a bit out. And we're getting back up to 3.5 bar still. And only allowing it to drop to about 3.2 bar. Okay, still back at 3.5 bar. I'm going to leave it there for now. We're back at 3.5 bar. Let's let the pump switch off and then see what how much water we've actually managed to get and if it's made any sort of significant difference. Okay, the pump is throttling down and it's turned off. One other thing to keep in mind is if you have a very big pipe or a valve that's open a lot, you're going to create a pressure drop in the system. Like for example, where the pressure tanks would help a lot is if you're running a shower, maybe not at full blast, or you've got a setup with a few showers and you're only running one. But if you're going to turn on a sprinkler system or open a few taps together in the house, then you're going to drop the whole pressure system and then the pump will kick on anyway. So where these pressure tanks really help is if you're at a slower flow. But let's see what we get. We're filling this bottle. So far it doesn't look like it's a significant difference. It seems very similar to what it was. Okay, so there we actually, I think, got a little bit less water. Let's just check the total capacity of the tank. We'll just allow it to fill up again. Okay, so now I'm turning off the pump again, moving over to another bottle. Okay, there we're dropping under 2 bar. So we're now at a lower pressure, and actually at the 2 bar we had a very similar amount of water to what we previously had. Okay, so move that over to the next one. Okay, so we definitely got a larger capacity of water, but that capacity is accessible at a lower pressure. Okay, we're now at about, oh, there we're stopping. So we took the tank down to about 1.5 bar. Okay, so we're going from 2 bar to 1.5 bar. We've gained, to guess, maybe about 5 liters of water, which is a significant gain. But to access that, we'd have to set the pump to allow lower pressure. But I'd still expect more. So let's see what happens if we take that pressure down further. So now I'm just going to adjust this and say let's go to like for example these little under counter RO tanks. We typically would set them to 0.8 or 0.7 bar. There we go. There we're at 0.8 bar. Just going to turn the pump back on so it can fill up the tank. In the meantime, I'm just going to empty some of these bottles just to have space to test again. Okay, there the pump is switched off. I'm going to turn it off here, and then let's see what we have if we have the tank's pressure set to 0.8 bar. We're at about 1.6 bar, which is interesting. It's less water than we got previously at that same pressure. So it might be that we went a little bit too low for this tank. So there we're back to about the capacity we got previously. We're at a 1.2 bar. Okay, now we're actually getting close to about half the capacity of the tank, which is more in sort of the range I'd expect to see from a tank like this. Yeah, there I'd say we're at about 30 liters, so that's sort of within the 50 to 60% of the capacity range now. but we've had to drop down under 1 bar to get it, so it's almost empty the tank. And there we're slowing down. Okay, so these are 18.9 litre bottles. They're not quite 20 litres. The 18.9 litre point tends to be down a little bit, so we've overfilled them a tiny bit, but if I were to guess here, we've got low 30 litres there at the moment, which is miles better than what we got previously. Let's see when it stops running. It's still running a little bit there. Okay, stop it there. Okay, so now we know at this setting we've gotten to a point where we're sort of in a realistic region. It's still not an exceptionally good result, but we're sort of within what we'd expect to get. So now let's see if we change some settings on the pump, if we can't improve against our baseline we had here and still get a usable water flow out of the system. Okay, so now that we've got our tank set up to carry more capacity, what can we do next? If you have a variable speed drive controller like this intelligent controller on this pump, we can actually set the point at which it turns on again. In this case, we press set twice, and it was at 70%. We're going to set it at 25% to give us around that 1 bar cutoff, and then we'll test again and see how much capacity we get out of the system with that setting. Okay, now that setting is in. Now it should allow us to drop down to about 1 bar before switching on. Let's see what we get in real life. So this one at the front was our baseline. Okay, down to 3.2 bar. Okay, there we're at the level where it switched on previously, and we're down to about 2 bar. So we're at a little bit lower pressure than we were when it switched on previously for the same amount of water. There we're getting close to double the amount, and we're at about 1.6 bar. And we're still getting a reasonable flow here. Okay, there it's 1 full. And we're actually still getting a decent flow rate out of the system. What are we at there? I can see we've dropped to about 6 or 7 litres per minute. So the pressure has caused a bit of a drop in flow. Okay, there we're getting close to the 1 bar cutoff. And there we're turning on. Okay. Yeah, so we basically have about 3 times the water stored here, and we are at about the 30 litre mark, I would guess. So that is sort of the lower end of what I'd be satisfied with for a tank. So up until now, we haven't actually changed the pressure of the pump. We started off at 3.5 bar, and now, just out of interest, we've set it to 4 bar just to see what the capacity difference, to 4.5 bar just to see what the capacity difference is we actually get. In a house situation, what many people might be concerned about is, are you going over your geyser's rated pressure? And just keep in mind, whenever you have a system running off a pump, you actually need a pressure relief valve after the pump, because the pump is a non-return valve in. So if your geyser builds up pressure, that pressure has nowhere to go. So you can damage your geyser and damage appliances if you haven't got a pressure relief valve afterwards. So even if you've got a 4 bar geyser, it's no problem to set the pump to 4.5 bar as long as you've got that 4 bar regulator after it. So let's see what we actually get at the 4.5 bar now. Again, going to aim for the single shower flow. And what we've done with the pump is we've left it at the 25% mark. So the idea is if you have a higher top pressure, that 25% should lift. So we hope to see that we don't get that drop off which we got at the end of the last test, as 25% of the pressure will be a higher pressure now. So we should in theory still be over 1 bar when the pump switches on. Oh, switching on. Okay, so that didn't really make a significant difference in the water. I think I was running a slightly higher flow. I think that's why it switched on a bit earlier, but I don't think that made a significant difference in how much water the tank's actually taken. So just for a sanity check, we went and checked at my house just what pressure do we actually have when 2 showers are running. And I see my house, which doesn't have a particularly great municipal pressure, we're actually sitting at 0.8 bar with 2 showers running. So going down to something like 0.8 is feasible. What we did find though with the specific controller, this intelligent controller, can only set the minimum trigger pressure down to 25%. So at our 4.5 bar, we were basically, we set it lower, but we got to the 25%, which was about just under 1.2 bar. That's why it kept triggering before the tank was empty. Just out of interest, this is what we got out of the tank when it was empty. So it's not quite 2 full bottles, but fairly close. So I would guess probably in the area of about 35 liters or so, which is decent for a 60-liter buffer tank. But what this whole experience has shown us, just these buffer tanks really aren't 100% plug and play. You do need to optimize them to get the most out of them. And if you want to get the benefits like not switching the pump on and off again, or perhaps power consumption, or just having them for backup water, you really need to make sure that you've actually set the tank up in a way that you get the maximum capacity out of it. Okay, after quite a bit of testing and playing around with things, something we realized is we kept getting a lot more water out with the pump off than with the pump on. So then what we tried to do is match the tank's pressure to the pressure point at which the pump switches on. And so far the sweet spot which we found seems to be about 0.2 bar higher than what the pump's trigger is, as there's a bit of a pressure loss in the system while there's flow. So what we've done now is we've actually upped the pressure from the 0.8 bar we've been running up until now up to 1.4 bar, because what we found with the specific intelligent controller is the lowest pressure we could set it to was 25% of the rated pressure, and currently we have it set at 4.5 bar. So then we set the turn on pressure basically at about 1.2. So with the tank at 1.4 bar, we are actually getting quite good results here. So if we just demonstrate this, let's fill our containers again. Just out of interest, you can measure your water pressure on any of these pressurized buffer tanks by just connecting an air pressure gauge to the air side of the buffer tank. So basically what we found out with all these tests is it is a bit finicky to set the tank to really get the maximum out of it. But so far it seems like what we found is aim to set your pressure of the tank about 0.2 bar higher than the point at which the pump turns on, and then try to set your pump to have the biggest possible range of pressure that it allows to drop at. Because, for example, as I said, in my house, we just did a sanity check and actually found out if I have 2 showers running, my pressure drops to 0.8 bar anyway. So anything above that is still okay for having a decent shower in. That will vary a bit from time to time. Where are we there? About 400 liters an hour, I think. Just for perspective, remember to the beginning of the video, this is what we got before we started playing around with the settings. It was switching on at probably about 8 liters or so. think there we're getting close to the switch on point. There we go. Okay. So that actually looks quite decent. That we found if we run it completely empty, we get the bottle up to about this level. So we're not quite getting all of the capacity out of the tank, but we are at least, I think, actually getting more than half of the tank as usable capacity, which is what we hope to see in the beginning of the video. So things to take away from this: make sure when setting up a system like this that you match your pump and pressure tank pressure settings to get the maximum usage out of the tank. And also, you'll get the most benefit out of something like this with a pump with a controller where you can actually set the on and off points, because then you tend to have more leeway to set where it actually turns on and off. But we'll definitely test it with a normal dumb pump controller as well, just out of interest to see what we actually get. Yeah, I'm quite satisfied with that result. We basically got over 3 times, about 3.5 times the capacity that we had at the start of the video. So I think that's a good result.